Many of us are getting back to nature, getting back to old ways of gardening. And one of the new trends that we've seen all over the country is the addition of chickens right in your own backyard. And in many cities, this is even occurring. Now, always check local regulations, and you might only be allowed chickens and hens and no roosters. You really have to look into that, and there may be quantities you're only allowed to have. But it really is a more natural way of gardening. And if you look behind me, you'll notice the chickens scratching in the compost. They're feeding on the old vegetables. Plus, when this garden was full of vegetables, it was sectioned off where the chickens were able to come in, and if you have a grasshopper problem, guess what? They eat all the grasshoppers. So they might eat all the Colorado potato beetles. They may eat all the Japanese beetles. Chickens also like to work in old beds, and if you'll watch, you'll see them. They're loosening up the soil. So they're really helping prepare the garden for next year. Also in this garden that we're looking at here, Steve has incorporated a lot of cover crops throughout the year. So it's a great way of getting back to some of the older types of gardening. It's real important in vegetable gardening to rotate crops and also stage crops, and that's one thing that's happened in this garden throughout the year. So you have different crops coming again and again and again. And before you plant a new crop, you might add your own compost, or you might even add some of the manures that we can look at right here. And the chickens have been working on this here. And this is a mixture of compost. And if you look, it's nice and loose. And over time, the chickens are going to work this in to the bed for next year. And this might even be cover crop later this fall, or throughout the early spring months, depending on when you want to plant cover crops. Right here, I've got buckwheat, which the chickens have just laid down. They were just let in this area just a day or two ago. But if you just look how loose the soil is. And just by adding a cover crop, you don't have to worry about double digging with a fork. But buckwheat is excellent in loosening the soil. And what it does, its roots grow down into the soil and just help break apart the soil. And what happens is when you get that soil and you put it in your hand, the soil is in little clumps formulated together. So you don't have to worry about the packing down of the garden. And then you can plant your plants next year. Maybe this will be tomatoes, where the tomatoes were over there. During this season, next year you'll put tomatoes here. So it's real important to rotate the crops. And I also find that the chickens eat weeds. So if you got weeds coming up, it won't be long between these beds here. All the weeds will be completely removed by the chickens. They also feed on the old beans, and we'll look in a minute at some lima beans. And so the chickens also feed on anything that falls to the ground. And in the process of feeding on all this material, the chickens reinvigorate the garden. So it's like they produce natural fertilizers right in your own garden, right in your own backyard. The only thing is, I may not want to wake up to that rooster at 4 o'clock in the morning. So, you know, some of us may just want to have the hens. In addition to staggering your crops, consider planting varieties that bear over a long time period. You know, you can plant bush beans or bush limas, and you can plant pole limas. And the pole beans last almost all season long, as you see here. Plant multiple varieties within a small area so you can get all the different types right to your dinner table. The other thing that you can keep in mind is when you have your own chickens, not only are they improving the garden, improving the soil, getting rid of pests, at the end of the day or early the next day, you can pick your very own homegrown fresh eggs. You know, there's nothing like cracking open that egg, and instead of finding one yolk, you can find double yolks, and if you're lucky, you can even find triple yolks. In addition to the brown and white eggs, you can have green eggs, purple eggs, and even blue eggs. So there's a lot of advantages of growing your own chickens right in your own backyard, right next to your vegetable garden. I'm Mark Viette. Join me next time in the garden.